The year is 1999. A hungry young company named Rocksteady Games builds the PlayStation 2 so there will be a platform upon which America can play their brand new game, Grand Theft Auto 3. Grand Theft Auto 3 was of course the very first game in the prestigious and long-running Grand Theft Auto video game franchise. Before this, the only game we ever had was Mario, and that was for babies, but now it's Daddy's turn. I first got into the series with the release of Grand Theft Auto 5 on the Xbox 360 back in 2013. Before then, the GTA series had never appealed to me. I just always thought it was some edgelord game that all the hardcore kids at school thought made them gangsters. I sure did love open world games at the time, like Just Cause 2, Assassin's Creed, Red Dead Redemption, and I really wouldn't have been allowed to play GTA anyway because it probably has nipples, but after playing so much Red Dead and falling absolutely in love with it, I thought, the new GTA probably worth a try. And yeah, I mean, it was the best thing ever, mind-blowing, unprecedented, revolutionary. I later played GTA 4 and loved that too, but that's not the point here. The point is that I've never played the PS2 trilogy, and from what I understand, they're actually thinking about making another Grand Theft Auto soon. So I thought it was finally time to see what all the fuss was about with these older ones. Of course, I did videos about GTA 3 and Vice City, which you should watch if you haven't. I loved Vice City, and I really wanted to 100% it, but I failed. I tried again with San Andreas. Did I fail? Well, you gotta watch the video to find out. At the start of this journey, I decided that the truest way for me to experience this trilogy was just to play it on the original hardware. See, I like to think of myself as a purist, a man of sophistication, who can appreciate the beauty in old things, and I think the best way to consume a piece of art for the first time is to get as close to the original version of that work as you can. So I bought a PS2 and the trilogy on disc so I could do just that. I got a lot of comments on my last two videos from people who seemed to think that I wasn't aware that there were newer versions of these games available. Don't worry, I am aware, but I'm not here to find the smoothest or cleanest or newest versions of these games. I'm here to play the original versions of these games. I think there's a lot to be said for playing games on their original hardware with their intended controllers. It might not be the easiest way to play them, but it's usually the most interesting. I'll touch on that a little bit more later, but I think it's time for me to talk about Grand Theft Auto San Andreas on the PlayStation 2. In this game, you play as Carl Johnson. After 5 years on the East Coast, it's time for him to go home. He grew up in gang-ridden South Central, but moved away and has been living legit in Liberty City ever since. He's called back home to Los Santos to bury his mom, but as soon as he steps off the plane, he's picked up by his old nemesis Officer Tenpenny, played by Samuel L. Jackson, and his partner Pulaski, played by Chris Penn. Tenpenny puts CJ in the back of his squad car, takes all his cash, and sends the cab away without letting him get his stuff out. What the hell? Tenpenny here is an evil, vile, almost cartoonishly corrupt cop, and he seems to have CJ wrapped around his finger and basically forces him to do all his dirty work. These guys actually killed another cop just now who was threatening to turn them in for all their misdeeds, and they're pinning the murder on CJ as blackmail. Now buckle up because there's a lot going on in this game's story. The last two were pretty easy to get through pretty quick, but there are a lot of in and outs to the San Andreas story, so you might want to sit down for this one. Cops drop CJ off and say, "See you around, Carl," which is pretty uncool of them because CJ was a member of the Grove Street family's gang, and Tenpenny dropped him off right in the middle of Bala's territory, who are the rival gang. When he gets home, he's flooded with ghosts from his past, and the reality of his mom's death finally starts to hit him. Just then his old chum Big Smoke comes out from around the corner and almost beats him down before realizing it's CJ.
Oh my god!
The two of them drive over to CJ's mom's funeral where they meet up with CJ's brother Sweet and his sister Kendall, as well as their friend Ryder. Kendall's happy to see CJ. Sweet, not so much. He's still mad because apparently they had another brother who was killed years ago and CJ missed that funeral because he was living on the East Coast. But we don't have time for that because soon the Ballas show up, and after a quick ambush, these guys make it back to Grove Street and CJ decides to stick around for a while since things are a lot worse than he realized. He immediately starts putting in work to get the families back on top and reclaim some territory. He also meets his sister Kendall's new boyfriend Caesar, who's associated with the Mexican gang Varios Los Aztecas, who seem to be on mostly friendly terms with the Grove Street families, and CJ's like, "Hey, you think you can date my sister, you stupid bitch?" But Caesar is just incredibly reasonable and diplomatic, and he's actually a pretty good dude who genuinely cares about Kendall, so CJ decides to place him on probationary approval. CJ also does some stuff with Sweet and Ryder Ryder, which mainly seems to involve re-establishing the families and taking back territory from the Ballas. Tenpenny and Pulaski show up a few times and get CJ to take out some Vagos, who are another far less friendly Mexican gang, and some Russian mobsters. And then there's Smoke. His missions also seem to be mostly focused on Vagos and Russians, with not much mind paid to the Ballas. Very interesting. He's also the only one that's moved out of Grove Street, for vague reasons, and also tries to change the subject every time Sweet brings up his mom's death. And also Tenpenny keeps stopping by his house. Probably doesn't mean anything though. I do like that whenever Tenpenny shows up, he's accompanied by his own evil theme music.
So Officer Tenpenny can sleep easy at night.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah. It's a sick beat. There's also the character Jeffrey.
Hey, man, it's OG Loke, homie. OG Loke.
Sorry, OG Loke, my bad. He's like this fake-ass gangster rapper who's not really a gangster and also has no musical talent. So CJ, for some reason, helps him cheat his way to the top by stealing things for him, including sneaking into the mansion of a successful rapper and stealing his songbook for Jeffrey. This actually seems to work, and OG Loke ends up gaining some real notoriety throughout the course of the story, but we're not going to hear much more from him right now. We'll circle back to him at some point. Now that CJ and Sweet have reunited the different chapters of the families, which I guess had fallen apart since he was away, Sweet tells the families to get together for a massive push against the Ballas, but on his way there, CJ gets an urgent call from Caesar, who tells him to come meet him right away to show CJ something. CJ meets him outside of a Ballas hideout where things seem pretty normal at first, but then who should come out but Ryder and Smoke, colluding with the Ballas, and then even worse possibly, colluding with Tenpenny and Pulaski. But then most worst of all, they're revealed to be in possession of the car that was used in the drive-by that was intended to kill Sweet, but ended up taking out their mom instead. I've always heard a lot of people were shocked and heartbroken by Smoke's betrayal. Now, I was already well aware of this twist before I ever played the game, but to me it was really obvious he had something to do with CJ's mom's death. I know most of you were like 6 years old when you first played this game, so you probably didn't pick up on all the obvious hints, and I guess Smoke is like a big funny goofball and not the type of guy you'd expect to be a monster, but personally this betrayal didn't hit me too hard. Ryder's betrayal was a little more surprising to me because 1, I'd never heard anything about it before, and 2, he was way less shady than Smoke. I never would have pegged him for a Judas. However, if I had known that Ryder's real name was Lance, I may have guessed it, because obviously in this universe people named Lance act like a cool, helpful guy who's gonna have your back, but they're actually a lame, unhelpful asshole who stabs you in the back. I still haven't gotten over what a bitch Lance Vance turned out to be. Upon realizing how fucked up things are, CJ tells Caesar to take Kendall somewhere safe and hide out, and at this point Caesar has completely earned my trust. He's not gonna be another Lance Vance, right? No, actually he's not. He's a straight shooter through and through. I think I have a crush on Caesar. So CJ has to rush over to help Sweet, but it's already too late. They get arrested, Sweet gets hauled off to prison, but CJ wakes up in the back of Tenpenny's squad car all the way out in the country. Tenpenny says, hey, don't try to fuck with Smoke or it'll be bad news for your brother in jail. I need you to take out this informant for me, and also make sure you just don't come up with a secret plan to bring me down either. CJ takes out the informant, and then luckily Caesar calls him up and says, hey, my cousin will help you out with getting up to some crimes for money if you want to. He goes to meet the cousin, who turns out to be Catalina. If you haven't played GTA 3 or watched my video, Catalina is your girlfriend who betrays you at the beginning of the game, then you spend the whole game tracking her down for revenge. It's a much simpler story, but GTA 3 is set in 2001, this game is set in 1992, so none of that stuff has happened yet. In this game, she's still fucking crazy, and to me, one of the funniest characters in the game. I mean, there are a lot of funny characters in this game, but she sure was one of them. As they do some robberies together, CJ ends up simping for her super hard. I mean, he comes to his senses eventually, but I could just never imagine Tommy Vercetti getting cucked in such a manner. At this time, Tenpenny also introduces Carl to this blissed-out hippie conspiracy theorist called The Truth, played by Peter Fonda. Lots of old school guys in these PS2 GTAs, and he's good too. These old movie stars are never phoning it in these games. It's great. Truth, like CJ, is another guy Tenpenny has by the balls, so they kind of become bros right away. CJ steals a combine harvester for him to help him harvest his weed. After helping Catalina enough, Caesar shows back up and brings CJ to another race, where he competes against this guy Woozy. After CJ wins, Woozy's like, you know what, Carl, I like the cut of your jib. Why don't you come work for me up in San Fierro? And yeah, Woozy's another straight shooter and a chill guy, so why the fuck not? But first, CJ's gotta tie up a few loose ends out here in the country. He meets up with Catalina, who says she's got a new man, who's none other than Claude from GTA 3. So Claude and Catalina were together for 9 whole years before she betrayed him in 3? Must have been hell for the poor guy. No wonder he became such a monster. So CJ wins the race against Claude, and even though they were racing for pink slips, Catalina's just like, nah, no pink slips, and gives CJ the deed to a garage in San Fierro. I mean, are you really allowed to just do that in a race? But before he can head there, CJ needs to take care of one last bit of business, which I guess is paying Truth for the weed that Tenpenny wants. But he gets there and realizes it's a trap. The cops show up, and CJ and Truth have to burn down the crop and skedaddle. CJ blows up the police helicopter, and the two of them make their way to the new garage in San Fierro. The garage is not exactly what CJ expected. I guess it's a bad garage, dirty or run down or something. CJ goes, well, this garage sucks. Time to just give up on life. And Kendall's like, hey, relax. Maybe just see if we can make it work for a minute. Truth knows some guys in town who can help him with the garage. They grab Jethro and Dwayne, who are from Vice City. Nice. As well as this nerd Zero, played by David Cross. They work on getting the garage up and running, and soon Carl and Caesar stumble upon a big-time crime meeting of a bunch of shady characters, including Ryder. These guys are up to some kind of thing. CJ meets up with Woozy to start working for him. Conveniently, one of the things Woozy needs is for CJ to take out the recently discovered drug syndicate that includes that fucking traitor Lance, so CJ is happy to do it. He starts taking care of that, as well as getting up to all sorts of other stuff in the city, killing more people for Tenpenny, helping Zero with his rivalry with this other nerd, helping Caesar get his hands on some cars, burying an innocent construction foreman in cement, helping Woozy with other triad business. Syndicate member 1, Jizzy B, killed. Boom. Syndicate member 2, Mendez, boom, killed. Number 3 is Ryder. Ryder doesn't seem to have any remorse about his betrayal at all. I guess he really was a Lance. Boom, killed. By the way, why did they make Ryder look exactly like Eazy-E? Is there a reason for it, or is it just a random reference? And Syndicate member 4, Mike Torino, you blow up a helicopter that he's supposedly in, but he's not killed. We'll hear more from him in a minute. Then they blow up the factory. The syndicate is taken down. Woozy is happy. All is well. But then CJ gets a phone call from the killer from Scream, who says if you want to ever see your brother alive again, you'll come to the desert and drive around in this monster truck for a minute. So he drives the monster truck around for a bit, and it turns out Torino was the Scream killer this whole time. The guy that you blow up in the chopper was just a decoy. Torino's played by James Woods, who seems like a fucking asshole, but I do always enjoy his performances.
Now this would be gross points, right, in this new, okay. Yeah, because those monkey points, yeah, okay, great. Okay, good. Book me a flight, rent me an igloo, and tell those dorks at the Quickie Mart that, boom, I am out of here, I'm a dot, I'm gone, okay?
And he's quite good as Mike Torino in San Andreas. He's a mysterious secret government agent, Illuminati deep state type. Torino also kind of has CJ by the balls by telling him if he doesn't do what he says or fails at any of the tasks he puts him on, Sweet's gonna die in prison, but he's a lot less of a smug dick about it than Tenpenny. A little less of a smug dick about it. Yeah, he's still kind of smug. Torino's missions are where things start to get truly insane, putting CJ in the middle of some high-level international balance of power shifting conflicts. Or maybe it's just some petty beef Torino has with a rival agency. He's not really upfront about the motivations, but it suffices to say that we're on a new level of insanity when it comes to what you're allowed to put in a Grand Theft Auto mission. Truth shows up with a plan for you to break into Area 51 to steal a jetpack from the military. Sorry, Area 69, my bad. This game works in the number 69 at every possible opportunity. Need a number to put on the runway at the airport? 69. The 99-cent store? Not sure what that is. We got the 69-cent store, even cheaper. You know 76 gas? No you don't, it's 69 gas. The San Francisco 49ers? Pretty sure you mean the San Fierro 69ers. That one's actually pretty funny, and I'm utterly baffled that there's no Route 69 highway in the game. So you steal the jetpack from Area 69 for Truth. The next mission, you steal this green goo for him, which is some mysterious, probably alien thing he needs for some of his weird stuff. After that, or during that, depending on how you play, CJ catches up with Woozy at his casino in Las Venturas. Apparently the mob is trying to... Oh yeah, Woozy is blind. CJ finds that out at some point. It's kind of important. The mob is trying to clip his wings so he can't get his casino up and running. He offers CJ a stake in the casino in exchange for him helping deal with the mafia. You also get a call from Truth saying that he left some boys out in the desert and you need to go get them. Turns out one of those guys is Kent Paul from Vice City, the manager of Love Fist. He takes them back to the mob casino where they link back up with the one and only Ken Rosenberg. Yikes, the years have not been kind. Apparently his friendship with Tommy has completely fallen apart, which made me pretty sad. They don't really explain why. Couldn't find too many answers on the internet either. What a shame. Ken was sent out west to be some kind of mediator between the three mob families of Las Venturas, the Sindacos, the Leones, and the Forellis. Kind of weird that the Forelli family doesn't want him dead since he was kind of an accomplice in Sonny Forelli's death, but actually they all want him dead, so he just spends his days up in this office waiting for the families to kill him, and he hangs out with with Tony Montana, who's been turned into a parrot. I guess CJ takes a pretty strong liking to Ken, plus Woozie is also pretty sick of the Mafia, so they decide to do a casino heist on the Mafia, which first involves CJ getting in good with them. He's introduced to Don Salvatore Leone, of course from GTA 3. There are a whole bunch of Mafia politics in this part that aren't really that important. All that really matters is that the families are all mad at each other. Salvatore has you do another Tom Cruise mission to kill some of Forelli's hitmen. Then after that, he sends you back to Liberty City for another hit. This was a really cool surprise. You don't see much of Liberty City, but it's still fun to be here again. And then CJ flies back to Las Venturas. And at some point during all this, CJ runs into Mad Dog, who was the rapper that he stole the songbook from for Jeffrey earlier. He's mad that OG Loc is so famous all of a sudden when he's such a poser. And he's drunk and he almost kills himself, but CJ saves him. Touch base with Mad Dog later, because of course Tenpenny and Pulaski have to show up and stir the pot some more. Turns out their crimes are finally starting to catch up with them, and the public knows how shady they are. Another cop, Officer Hernandez, who's actually been helping them the whole time but wasn't super important yet, so I didn't mention them, was the one who turned them in. So they kill Hernandez, make CJ dig a grave, and Tenpenny leaves Pulaski in charge of the situation. CJ briefly tries to reason with Pulaski, but all of a sudden Hernandez pops up and he's alive, but Pulaski shoots him right away, saying, he's not alive anymore. He tries to escape, but then CJ catches up to him and puts him down like a dog. A reservoir dog. With all that out of the way, everything is in place to rob the casino, and they do it. Obviously, so much of the heist is taken from Ocean's 11. I love when GTA does this, recreating scenes from movies and letting you play through them. I hope they keep that going in GTA 6. Also, Salvatore is mad at CJ because he was supposed to kill Rosenberg, but he robbed Salvatore's casino instead, and good, fuck Salvatore Leone. After a successful heist, there's nothing left to do but run the best damn casino in town. Then after sitting and watching one single audition, CJ decides that working at a casino is just way too hard. But then Mad Dog shows up right on time to say, hey, we can all just move back into my mansion in Vinewood in Los Santos. Oh, but a little thing though, it's been occupied by the Vagos, so we just gotta make sure we take out the small army that's living there now, and yeah, they just take them out, no problem, and everyone, I guess, just moves in. Of course, Torino shows up right away and needs Nico to do some more Michael Bay shit. Mad Dog wants revenge on OG Loc, and CJ helps him because he's mad at Jeffrey too for taking a record deal from Smoke. Makes enough sense to me, but how come Jeffrey never mentions to Mad Dog that CJ was actually the one who was the actual one who actually stole the songbook? Is there a reason? But either way, that's our first real loose end finally tied up. Torino comes knocking again. CJ has had it, and he's like, I don't care who you are, who you work for, who your mom is, I'm done taking your shit. But James Woods is like, hey, whoa, no shit to take, my guy. I just came to let you know I finally got your brother out of prison. So CJ goes to pick up Sweet. It's supposed to be a happy reunion. Carl tells him all the good news and about how much success him and Kendall are having, but he just responds pissed off for no reason. And this is where Sweet really starts to lose me as a character. He lists some vague reason for being mad at Carl.
I need to go check on things in the hood. Man, that's the problem. You always a perpetrator, running from what's real.
The fuck does that mean? That's just nonsense. Sweet asks him what he's done for the hood, and CJ responds with a completely valid point.
Man, what the hood done for me? Always dragging me down. Ever since I got out the hood, shit been cracking.
Sweet has no counter-argument, so he just responds with something that he thinks will make CJ feel like an asshole, even though it's a completely empty and untrue statement.
That's everybody's dream to get out the hood.
Man, you sound just like Smoke right now.
Trying to get out of the hood's that's not what Smoke did wrong. What was wrong was trying to murder and fuck over all his friends to do it. At the beginning of the next mission, CJ walks in on Sweet about to smoke some crack, even though crack is what's destroying the hood, and he admonished CJ earlier for not caring about the hood enough. Anyway, he tells Carl that they need to start taking back the hood from the Ballas. They do that. CJ also takes this opportunity to apologize to Sweet for abandoning Grove Street and not being there when his little brother Brian was killed, which, from what I understand about the backstory, is very big of him to do. Sweet, rather than admitting that he's been too harsh with Carl about certain things, just says, apology accepted. And CJ's good with that, so I guess I should be too, whatever. Later, everyone gathers in the mansion to watch the verdict for Tenpenny's trial, since he was finally arrested for killing Officer Pendlebury at the beginning. Most of them watching are expecting a relatively light sentence, since cops always get off super easy. All the charges are dropped, and Tenpenny just gets to keep doing his thing, because that's what happens when a cop commits a crime. The whole gang is watching, as well as the entire city, and they are pretty unhappy about this. The citizens of Los Santos start rioting like crazy. Sweet heads back down to Grove Street to make sure they aren't hit too hard by the rioting. Caesar asks CJ to help him and the boys, taking back some territory from the Vagos. After this, Sweet comes in with some very interesting news. He knows where Smoke is hiding. Well, now there's nothing left to do but tie up the last two loose ends. So CJ sets off to drive over to Smoke's crack den where he's holed up. Crack Fortress, not crack den, that's my bad. So he drives over to the crack fortress, crack palace. CJ drives over to the Crack Palace. After fighting through a small army, CJ finds Smoke up in his office playing Sega Genesis. Smoke has zero remorse for what he's done, and he's wearing a bulletproof vest, which is apparently not gangster at all. He starts shooting, and CJ has no choice but to take him down. With Smoke dead, there's just one last asshole to deal with, and here he is. Tenpenny tells CJ that even though Pulaski's dead, he's got a whole new generation of dirty cops, so he's planning on slowly bringing around to his way of thinking, and not a damn thing is gonna change. Tenpenny tries to kill CJ, but CJ pulls a fast one.
Time to die.
Sweet!
What?
To me, it kind of looked like he wasted his split-second opportunity to dive behind cover, but I guess Tenpenny misses anyway and runs out the building. Carl has to fight his way through the burning Crack Palace. Tenpenny hops into a fire truck with a few other dirty cops. Sweet pulls a crazy move here, and after an insane chase through the city, Tenpenny ends up crashing his truck, and where else but right in the middle of Grove Street. CJ wants to put a bullet in his head just to be sure, but Sweet thinks it's smarter to make it look like an accident, and I actually agree with Sweet. They leave Tenpenny dead in the street, and we get a big happy ending. Truth is thrilled that CJ beat the system. Not sure if that's accurate, but he did kill a few dirty bastards and got off scot-free. Kendall and Caesar get engaged, probably. Caesar mentions popping the question. Mad Dog gets his gold record, which is great for Rosie and Kent Paul by extension. Everything is settled down between the Johnson boys, and CJ sets out to spread his good word all over the rest of San Andreas. What a tale. This story is truly epic. It's astonishing how well it balances all the moving parts and maintains its high energy until the very end. Now, is it some kind of hard look into the darkness of a man's soul like GTA 4? Does it rip your heart out like Red Dead Redemption 2?
No.
Hell no, it's not trying to do any of that. It's shockingly cohesive considering all the elements it juggles. It services the gameplay and mission design so expertly and confidently. I'm just surprised Laszlo Benzies and Stan Hauser didn't just drop the mic right here and retire. And of course, it's just entertaining as hell. It also does an amazing job setting itself firmly in the world of 3 and Vice City and connecting itself to those games flawlessly while still completely being its own story. My only real complaint is the way Sweet is written towards the end of the game. Sorry if anyone out there loves this character. CJ was totally good and a very entertaining protagonist, but I don't think I liked him as much as Tommy Vercetti. I'd say in terms of GTA games I've played, I liked him more than Claude, Michael, or Franklin, but less than Nico, Tommy, or Trevor. Also, I found this really cool video. If you're a fan of this game, you probably know about it already, but it's a little 20-minute prequel to the story that kind of fills in a lot of the backstory. Rockstar calls it a prologue, but really it should be watched after you play the game because it spoils a few things, and a lot of it probably might not make much sense if you aren't already familiar with the story. You get to see a little bit of CJ's time in Liberty City, some of Smoke's scheming, how the Liberty City families ended up in Las Venturas, Ken Rosenberg leaving rehab, and Tommy isn't taking his phone calls, which is sad. You see Officer Hernandez's first meeting with Tenpenny and Pulaski. Kinda makes you feel really bad for Hernandez. And of course it ends with the drive-by that killed CJ's mom. Such a well-done short. If you're a big fan of this game and you somehow don't know about this prologue, it's gonna be a real treat. You definitely need to watch it. After this video, it's available on Rockstar's YouTube channel. So how about a little negativity? Like I said before, these games are such beloved classics, so the original experience was really important to me. Again, I'm not looking for the best version of these games. I'm looking for the original version of these games. So I'd always heard that San Andreas really pushes the PS2 to its limits. This game takes the PS2 and squeezes every last bit of juice out of it, they say. And oh boy, that is more true than I could have possibly fathomed. Now, this game on this hardware is a technical marvel for certain. The last 2 games, which had significantly smaller maps, also had brief loading screens between parts of the city, so it's pretty impressive that for this much bigger game, they were able to figure out how to let you travel the map seamlessly with no loading screens. But man, they had to make some concessions. Overall, I'd say the graphics during gameplay are a bit of a step down from Vice City. Everything's a little lower resolution, the draw distance is lower. It's kind of a bummer you can never get a real look at any of the city skylines. Shit straight up looks like Superman 64 at times. I played the definitive edition and that made it clear that the unlimited draw distance is even worse, but we'll get to that later. There's also a bit more pop-in, which can kind of fuck you up during gameplay sometimes. Generally just minute to minute, I found the game a little harder to look at than Vice City. I will say a lot of things like car models are really starting to look a lot more realistic in this one. Like GTA 3's cars kind of looked like they were made out of Play-Doh or something. I'm sure they just had a lot more experience modeling cars at this point. It also froze on me one time. Neither of the last 2 games ever froze. Really not that bad, especially since it's just commonplace now for games to just keep crashing every couple of hours, even on console. And I talked a lot in my last 2 videos about how the PS2 can't handle too many vehicles on screen, so during police chases, they often prioritize loading in enough police cars into the environment and don't load in much normal traffic, so it's really hard to find a car to escape in if you don't have one. And there were just plenty of times you'd be doing something important, like a timed mission, and there would just be no cars anywhere nearby. Thought San Andreas would try to fix this issue, but if anything, liking they doubled down. I felt so much more stranded than I ever did before in the other games, especially in this larger environment.
Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, out now on PlayStation 2, rated M for mature.
Look at the map here. I mean, what can I say that hasn't already been said? I wasn't too sure how impressive it would really be from a 2024 perspective. Like, yeah, 3 cities sounds really cool since the last 2 games only had 1 city, but that could easily just be a case of quantity over quality. I mean, any game can have 3 cities in it. GTA 1 had 3 cities in it, and that game sucks. Look, here's my Minecraft world with 3 cities in it. We got Wood City, Stone City, and Sand City. But wait, what's that over here? Wool City and Brick City? That's 5 whole cities in one map. My point here is that anything can be called a city in a video game, and you could just put a whole bunch of them in there. Skyrim's most epic cities are really just small villages made up of a few huts, so this map could go either way. But you already know what I'm going to say here. This map more than lives up to the 20 years of praise it's received. This is one of the most well-designed maps I've ever seen in a game. The 3 cities not only each feel as big as the last 2 games' cities, even though they're technically smaller, but they're all so distinct in terms of both their physical layout and their vibe and atmosphere. So I've lived in Los Angeles pretty much my entire life. I've spent some short periods of time living in other parts of California, including San Francisco, and I've been to Las Vegas. I've also never been to New York or Miami, which is to say that unlike the last 2 games, I'm actually highly familiar with the real-life locations from San Andreas. And I'm gonna real quick address the one main gripe I have with this map, is that some aspects of the layout are sacrificed due to technical limitations. I mean, that's just an assumption. I'm assuming the reason the map is basically a square was for technical reasons, so I'm definitely not bashing the map design. It's just a little weird that in this map, Las Vegas is more northern than San Francisco, and the drive from Los Santos to Las Venturas is a drive through the woods, when in real life, the drive from LA to Vegas is through the desert. In a perfect world, they would have made the map like this. Yeah, we're gonna take this part and kind of move it down here. Maybe rotate it slightly, and just take this part, kind of move it over here, maybe add a little forest up here, and boom, you got yourself a super accurate map. Boom. Okay, enough of that. That was pretty much just a nitpick. Now, we'd be here all day if I wanted to talk about every single thing neat about this map, because in addition to the 3 cities, we also have a dozen or so small towns around every state, plus other locations, little rest stops, facilities, different types of motels. Some of them are pretty standard, but some of them are really cute and quirky. Restaurants, cabins, farms, roadside attractions, historical sites. For some reason, I found this abandoned grocery store to be really cool. I wouldn't say every single small town is completely different from any other small town, but many of them are completely unique, and every single one is packed with so much personality. And it all feels like towns and establishments that sprung up naturally over the course of time rather than copy and paste locations placed here by game devs. I did find it significantly more difficult to navigate than Vice City, for obvious reasons. I felt like I could never find the right freeway exit or on-ramp. There's this one street here in Los Santos where I'm like, okay, I want to get to that house up there in the hills, but it actually leads you straight out of the city, and the only way to get to the hills from here is to just make a U-turn and go a different way. Sometimes during chase sequences or timed driving sections, I'd have to keep pausing over and over to make sure I was going the right way, which did kill the momentum a lot of the time. But when I was just casually cruising around, driving somewhere, not worried about time, I actually really enjoyed pulling my car over and looking at my paper map to figure out where to go, using my surroundings to see where I am, and using the paper map I'm actually physically holding in my hand while watching other cars pass by on the highway with a nice chill song playing, made me feel like I was on an actual real-life road trip. These are some of the most immersive moments I've ever experienced in a game. It was straight up magical. After spending all your time in the last 2 games being confined to a single city, San Andreas makes you feel like you've finally been unleashed onto this world that the other 2 games were only hinting at. It was obviously obvious that there was some version of America that existed outside of the cities, but now you finally get to see what that's actually like. So you of course begin your journey in Los Santos. Once again, the layout is a little off compared to real life. I'm going to stop mentioning that, but the feel is spot on. They do put a lot of focus on the South Central area, which is one of the least fun areas of the city. Freeways are a big part of LA. Aside from bridges, they really didn't exist in the last 2 games. Here they're minimally functional, especially when you can't really read any of the signs, but they work really well aesthetically. They're pretty necessary for that LA vibe. The Hollywood area left me wanting a bit. There's a little TV studio here, but it's got nothing on the movie studio from Vice City. It's kind of weird that the Miami game has a way cooler movie studio than the LA one. The orange haze that this game is known for works really well for the kind of smoggy, sticky, hot, sweltering LA summer vibe. Apparently it doesn't look like this on the Xbox version, and even though this version of Los Santos is much smaller than the version in GTA 5, there are actually a few LA landmarks here that don't appear in the HD universe. When CJ leaves Tenpenny out in the woods, they keep all the main missions in this portion outside of the city, so if you're mostly sticking to the story during this part like I was, this whole section feels like you're really way out in the country. Kind of like Far Cry 5, like hundreds of miles away from where the nearest city is, when in reality, you're like a 10-minute walk from two different cities. And yes, the extremely limited draw distance is a big factor, but every region of the map is given such distinct character that it makes them feel further apart than they really are. Plus all the road layouts and hills and everything is really designed to stretch these small areas and make you feel like you're covering more ground than you actually are. Your next stop is San Fierro, which is the most urban feeling of the main three cities. It's much more densely packed than Las Venturas, and the buildings are generally a lot taller than Los Santos. Plus it has this harbor, which is a very city thing for a city to have. I'd say most people agree that Watch Dogs 2 is the definitive San Francisco map in a video game, and I agree with most people agreeing. However, that game is much more focused on the modern tech bro-ridden version of San Francisco, so it's nice to get a game set in a more classic San Francisco before Silicon Valley moved in. Surprising how little copy-paste content there is in this massive world. It's like every single building was designed and built by a different person. Once again, this level of detail goes such a long way in making these tiny cities feel like they have all kinds of distinct neighborhoods with different people living in them. The building scale feels a bit more thought out too. Like in Vice City, a lot of the buildings felt too small, like they were like 85% scale or something. It's a lot more consistent in this one. The orange haze really worked in Los Santos and in the woods, almost gave it a little spooky vibe, but it looks pretty weird to me in San Fierro, kind of kills the vibe. You just never see that kind of lighting in San Francisco. I mean, there's also the blue lighting that they use a lot, which looks a little more okay, but it still looks like hot-ass day lighting. And it didn't really work when you go back to Liberty City, especially since it's supposed to be snowing. They should have just locked this mission to nighttime, because the daytime lighting does not work here. The normal blue daytime lighting looks okay in San Fierro, but on a cloudy night, that's when the atmosphere really shines and makes it feel like I'm actually there. Plus, even with the limited draw distance, they do let you get a decent look at the skyline. After this, you go into the desert, and man, this area is surprisingly pretty. The colors pop so hard out here. It's got this really cool Looney Tunes Wile E. Coyote aesthetic during the day and gives the hills that bright orange Monument Valley look, and in the evening, the dusky purple night sky is so beautiful, even with these old graphics. There's so much to find out in the desert, and it can have this really eerie and even sometimes otherworldly vibe. Hey, was Pearl here? No, this is probably some other reference to some kind of thing I don't even know about. Now, way out in the desert, we have the gleaming city of Las Venturas. This was hands down my favorite city in the game. It's just so much more visually unique than the other two, and I also don't mind that it was a little easier to navigate. Plus, the whole desert / Las Venturas section was probably my favorite part of the game. The Strip is the obvious highlight. I love how they use real Vegas hotels and pretty much only change the names. I mean, who hasn't wanted to drive a motorcycle up the side of the Luxor Pyramid? I kind of thought the Excalibur Hotel was a bad choice to include, because the simplistic, bright-colored castle kind of, once again, makes it look like a bit of an N64 game. Could have swapped it out for the Bellagio. Would have been nice to see the fountain. And you got Old Vegas off to the side, which in real life has been kind of preserved, but not really. Avery Carrington cameo. They even do a really good job including the area surrounding the Strip. Reminds me a lot of driving around looking for parking in Vegas. They have the stadium, they have the shitty poor neighborhoods, they have the shitty rich neighborhoods. We always forget, but people do actually live in Las Vegas. And one of the neat little tricks they use here is they use the hills to hide the fact that the city is actually right on the coastline. Really feels like there isn't a drop of water for miles. And that's the map. It was kind of annoying when I was in San Fierro and I didn't have enough money for a safe house with a closet, so I had to drive all the way to another city just to take my hat off. I guess I could have just gone to the barber and that would have removed my hat, but what if it had been my shoes? What then? I also like the names of the cities way more in this one. Vice City and Liberty City, they're kind of lame names. I mean, I like the Miami Vice reference, but so many fictional cities are just named something city. Gotham City, Carcer City, Raccoon City, and like, how many American cities do you know in real life that are actually named like that? Sure, I guess New York is sometimes referred to as New York City, especially when distinguishing it from New York State. The only other somewhat known city with a name like that I can think of is Kansas City, and that's not a very big city. Most cities are named something like Chicago, Miami, Boston, Seattle, New Orleans, St. Louis, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Someone ever said to me, I live in Boston City. I would assume they were talking about a small town somewhere else in the country that has nothing to do with Boston, Massachusetts. So anyway, I think Los Santos, San Fierro, and Las Venturas are much better names for cities, and they're all somewhat clever. Los Angeles translates to the Angels, and Los Santos translates to the Saints. Works just as well. San Francisco in real life is named after St. Francis. San Fierro apparently translates to Saint Iron, which I don't think is an actual character in any mythology, but it works for a city known for its harbor, and the name sounds similar enough. In real life, Las Vegas translates to the Meadows, which, sure, but Las Venturas translates to the Fortunes. That one's pretty self-explanatory. And of course, bonus points because the names sound similar. Again, I could talk all winter long about the map and the countless cool locations and little details, but if you've ever played this game before, you already know all about that. If you haven't played this game, well, I don't want to spoil it anymore. Go play right now. Not the definitive edition, though. We'll talk about that later, but what we're going to talk about right now are the mechanics. When I first played GTA 3, I could not believe how obtuse the shooting mechanics were. It's this weird lock-on aim where it's just automatically locks on to the closest target, and then you can't use the analog stick to move it. You have to cycle through the targets as quickly as you can. And the targeting reticle is this hard-to-see little box here. I mean, I got used to it eventually, but Jesus. Vice City didn't change too much about this, but they let you crouch in that, which is certainly nice, and the targeting thing is a little easier to see. In San Andreas, I think they finally understood that they need to try to make the shooting something that's fun to do, not just something you have to do. It has the same lock-on shooting and cycling through target controls as the other ones, but now you can use the analog stick. You lock onto somebody the same way, but you can move your aim wherever you want, like their face, for example, or anywhere. Like if someone's next to a car, you can now purposely aim at the car and blow it up. In the last two, the only way to aim precisely was with a scoped weapon like a sniper rifle, and even then it was very stiff. Plus in GTA 3, you were forced to use inverted aiming, which is just so fucked up. It's still far from perfect here though. For one, the lock-on aiming isn't as automatic as it was before. In Vice City, if you hold down the aim button, it'll lock on to the nearest enemy, even if you can't see them. A lot of times you'd walk into a building or around a corner and you'd start getting shot at from God knows where, but you could just hold R1 and you'd be locked onto them in less than a second. In San Andreas, you have to be facing toward an enemy to lock onto them, so if you don't already know who's shooting at you, well, you better figure it out quick because the auto aim is far less generous. And this wouldn't be so bad, except it actually aims in the direction that CJ's facing rather than the direction the camera's facing. I'm getting shot at and I'm looking around, then I finally see the guy who's shooting at me and then I aim my gun, but oops, CJ was facing another direction, so all of a sudden the camera's facing somewhere else and you have to reorient yourself, then remember where the guy was again, and yeah, that's an issue for sure. I like how you can roll now, which makes you harder to hit and lets you get the drop on enemies. Also in the other ones, you could keep your aim locked on and keep shooting at someone while you're running away from them, but in San Andreas, again, you have to be facing towards someone to shoot them. You can be locked onto a guy and shooting at him, but if you step back, CJ's gonna turn around and start shooting his guns in the air. So shooting is an improvement overall, but still very far from perfect. They added stealth mechanics, pretty simple, but definitely functional. You can move while crouched and take out enemies with a melee weapon or a silenced gun. The movement is vastly improved. You can actually scale walls in this one, which I was not expecting. In the other ones, you could sort of jump, but it was so weak it barely served any purpose. Most of the time you tried to jump over a wall, it played this stupid animation for a few seconds. It almost felt like it was punishing you for trying to jump. You can swim now. That's incredible. Again, I wish you could swim in Vice City, but they kind of had to include it here because there's so much water on the map that constantly falling in and dying would have made me die in real life. Now, it's pretty not fun, especially with how many times I ended up driving off a cliff and just had to slowly swim around for a while until I reached some kind of shoreline I could climb onto. Like, it's nice that you don't die as soon as you hit the water, but plenty of the time it was just faster for me to drown myself than it was for me to swim around and try to find a way out. And you know, you do still lose all your weapons if you die, unless you date this girl in San Fierro. She works at a hospital, and I guess that means you get to keep your guns? I mean, I don't know, there's some logic to that. And you can also date this other girl whose dad is a cop, and she makes it so you can keep your guns if you're arrested, and this is such a relief. It's so exhausting to lose everything when you die for a stupid reason, except she might not want to date you right away. She likes CJ fat. Yeah, in this one, your body type changes based on how much you eat and how much you work out. You really just want to get as jacked as possible if you're only looking for the best stats. I'm pretty sure the only gameplay reason to be fat is so Barbara will like you, otherwise it just hinders your movement, but I enjoyed the mechanic quite a bit. There are other RPG-esque elements at play here. Some of the stats are just linear improvements. Increase your driving stat, car handles better, increase your lung capacity, you can hold your breath underwater longer, that kind of thing. But some of them add a new dimension to it, like changing the function of weapons as you get better at them. A lot of them just get better handling, but like with the Tech 9 and a few other one-handed weapons, if you pump up the stats enough, you get to dual wield it, which is always awesome. The melee combat is much more in-depth. You can learn different fighting styles. They don't really seem to be actually that different, but they are cool. More new types of melee weapons are added, a katana, giant dildo. Rockstar has dabbled in these RPG elements since, like you get slightly fatter or skinnier in Red Dead 2, depending on how much you eat. GTA 5 does let you upgrade stats, but it feels kind of pointless in that game. There are new types of vehicle mechanics, like bicycles. You can drive a train, the jetpack, of course. Looks pretty stiff, but once you get the hang of it, it's super maneuverable. There are also a lot of novelty vehicles, which is very important to me. The air vehicles are taken to a whole new level. GTA 3 had the Dodo, which could only fly for like 3 seconds unless you did the sneaky move. Vice City introduced helicopters and a seaplane. They were good, but somewhat rudimentary, and there was an altitude cap that was lower than a lot of the buildings. But San Andreas is really encouraging you to take to the skies with some beefy new planes and helicopters. One of my favorite things about this game is how you could really customize CJ. In Claude, GTA 3 had one outfit, aside from the prison uniform at the beginning, and this alternate outfit that apparently comes with the PC port, but we don't need to talk about that version here. Vice City had a whole bunch of outfits Tommy could wear. They were awesome, but they were all preset outfits. You couldn't mix and match anything. I really enjoyed making sure CJ had the right outfit for every part of the story. You can customize cars too, which seemed cool at first, except cars are still so temporary in these games. They can't take too much damage, and they still explode if flipped, so I don't know, customizing them seemed kind of pointless to me. After playing Vice City for the first time, I thought it had the greatest soundtrack of any game I've ever played, and that is not a unique opinion. I've heard a lot of love of San Andreas over the years, of course, but I don't really hear people ever talking about the soundtrack very often. That's because it isn't that good. Now don't get me wrong, there are a lot of great songs here. It just didn't feel as cohesive or thematically relevant as Vice City's, and the songs are good, but certainly not as good. I thought even GTA 3, with its soundtrack of mostly indie bands you'd never heard of, had a much stronger identity than San Andreas's. Radio Los Santos, with its then contemporary hip-hop, felt very appropriate, and I did love the moment when driving to San Fierro for the first time after being out in the country and this cool van and a horse with no name started playing. The soundtrack was good, but it didn't blow my mind. I just kept thinking like, not the Jane's Addiction song I would have picked, not the Guns N' Roses song I would have picked, not the Tom Petty song I would have picked. If you love this soundtrack, that's awesome. It's full of great songs. It just doesn't come together for me personally. I do also like that the SFUR station is hosted by a battle droid.
A gathering of humongous brain fungus. House on SFUR. This is what trendy people like. Going till the police break it up. SFUR.
Now, a lot of these missions are more scripted than in previous games, which makes them feel much more epic and multifaceted, with multiple stages, interesting locations, various types of gameplay. Like this one where you have to drive a motorcycle onto a plane as it's taking off and dodge the debris falling out of the back, then fight your way to the front, but you have to use melee weapons since this thing is full of explosives, then plant a bomb and grab a parachute, then jump out of the back and blow it up. And this one's honestly relatively simple compared to a lot of the best missions. The casino heist is like a 14 mission long mission. There are so many aspects to the setup process, as an epic heist should be. Then when the time comes to actually do the job, it's a superb payoff. It's quite a long mission just by itself, and you spend so much time deep in the bowels of the building that at the end when you emerge onto the roof, you can almost smell the warm night air, and this is another one of the coolest moments in the game. And Black Project, the one where you have to steal the jetpack from Area 69, is hands down the most fun mission out of any of these three games. Probably the most fun mission out of any GTA I've played. The final mission, End of the Line, is just a super solid example of what a final level in a game should be. Of course, it wraps up the most important story elements, but gameplay-wise, it's suitably long but not drawn out. It switches between multiple settings and utilizes so many different gameplay mechanics to make you feel like you've truly mastered everything the game has thrown at you so far. Of course, a lot of these missions are not fun. In fact, some are incredibly frustrating. Now, as I continue to say, I've never played this game before, but as someone who ends up around a lot of nerds all the time for some reason, I have heard a lot of San Andreas discourse over the years. And as best I could tell, there were 3 infamously difficult missions in this game. Learning to Fly, Supply Lines, and Wrong Side of the Tracks. Learning to Fly, the mission where you have to learn to fly, it was pretty hard, but it never seemed unfair to me. I kind of enjoyed the little difficulty spike. I honestly found it easier than driving school. Here they're about to give you access to a bunch of planes and a bunch of missions that require flying, so they want to make sure you have a decent handle over it. I liked the mission. Supply Lines, fuck you. Now this wasn't the hardest mission in the game for me, but it just feels sloppily put together. Like it wasn't intended to be this hard. In this one you fly an RC plane around and have to kill 4 drivers by shooting them with the plane, then drive back to the base before the plane runs out of fuel. But the amount of fuel they give you leaves almost no room for error, and the longer you take, the further apart the targets get, which of course costs more fuel, not to mention that the RC plane is by far the worst handling plane in the game. Throw in a little PS2 bullshit and David Cross yelling at you the whole time, yeah, I can see why we've got a contender for the worst mission of all time. But there is one mission that I was dreading more than anything in the game. Wrong Side of the Tracks is widely considered to be the most difficult part of San Andreas. There is not a single GTA mission across any game that I hear more about than this one. My understanding of this mission was that I was going to spend hours at my PS2, failing constantly, hearing,
All we had to do was follow the damn train, CJ.
over and over in my head until I want to rip the speakers out of my TV. Plus, this is the original PS2 version, so I know they won't be pulling any punches. When I got to Smoke's house and I saw the name of the mission come up on the screen, my heart started pounding, my ears started ringing. I dropped to my knees and wept. This is it, the hardest mission ever in GTA. I beat it in 2 tries. And that was only because I fell off the bike the first time. How the hell did this easy-ass, forgettable-ass mission get this reputation? It tells you to drive next to the train so Smoke can shoot the guys on the train, so you drive next to the train and then Smoke shoots them. That's the mission. They can't damage you much, they don't have extra health, they don't have any cover. I mean, I can understand if you fell off the bike a couple times like I did, but what else? The mission is super short, a decent little bit of fun, and one of the easiest in the game. I would not have given this a second thought if it wasn't for the weird reputation it has. I understand most of you were like 8 when you played this for the first time, so this mission probably was a lot harder, but then wouldn't that mean every mission was a lot harder? Like this one wouldn't stand out? Comments, please explain to me why people think this mission's hard. So yeah, supply lines was a big pain in the ass, but I didn't find any of these other infamous missions to be a serious problem. There were some much bigger pains in the ass, and really that just mostly boils down to the lack of checkpoints. I always hear people saying that checkpoints are for babies, and I have no problem with needing to redo a tough part of a game over and over until I can conquer it, but having to redo long, tedious, mind-numbing sections of the game over and over before you can get back to the hard part seriously has me reconsidering how I spend my very limited time on this planet. I don't mind hard missions. It's having to redo the slow, dull, easy lead up to those missions that kills me every time. These Catalina missions were really hard. Hard in a way that I enjoyed for the most part, but there's so much buildup that I just hated playing them by the time they were done. One of the hardest missions is this one 555 We Tip. Here you have to disguise yourself as a valet, get into this guy's car, drive it to your garage, plant drugs, and then drive it back within the time limit. It's a really tight time limit, so you have to go fast, but you can't get a scratch on the car, so you have to drive super fast and super careful. This is a decently fun challenge, something I don't mind trying a whole bunch of times to get right. It's just every time you fail, you also have to go through the long-ass setup process every time of driving back to the hotel, following the valet underground, stealing the uniform, going back up top, and then standing around for a minute while you wait for your guy to show up. That setup process is really fun the first time you do it, but the 5th or 6th time, it feels like a slap in the dick. This mission is really hard, and when I start to get in the zone and then fail, well, I have to wait so long before I get to try again that I'm no longer in the zone when I need to be. The mission Key to Her Heart is the worst story mission in the game. It's just tedium with no actual hard part. It's just a multi-phase tailing mission. It's very slow paced. You just follow someone home while they make a stop and try not to draw attention to yourself. Now, okay, since it's so easy, I mean, yeah, it'll be slow, but you won't have to try multiple times, right? Because it's easy? Well, there are a couple ways to fail. One is if you get so bored playing the mission that you zone out and forget what you're doing and you get too close and spook them. There's also the option of a cop car coming out of nowhere and hitting you, giving you a wanted level, which also spooks them. Because in this game, by the way, far more than the previous two, cars really just come out of nowhere to hit you, including cop cars, and that always gives you a wanted level. Luckily, this one never happened to me in this particular mission. Or the third way to fail is when you finally get to the end, it says the Gimp will be arriving shortly, don't let him get to the house, and I'm like, what? Wait, which house? Fuck, okay, one of these. Okay, the Gimp has nearly reached the house. Which person's the Gimp? Why isn't it marked on the map or have a marker over his head? Fuck, no. Please, no, I don't want to do this whole mission all over again. Which one is the Gimp? No! Yeah, it turns out that guy was the Gimp. Why did they not make that completely clear? I guess it's my fault for not paying attention to which house she went into. Also, why isn't he dressed like a Gimp? That would have helped. But it's all good, because all you have to do is drive back, walk through the casino to the start of the mission, skip the cutscene, drive to the other casino, slowly tail them as they drive to the sex shop. Just gonna wait at this red light right here. Then you're gonna follow them this, another red light right here. We're just gonna hang out for a bit. Then you're gonna follow them this way. They're really taking the scenic route, which is nice. So you can hold on, sorry, another red light. So we'll just wait here for that light to turn green. Then we're going to follow them to the sex shop. Then all we got to do is get out and follow her on foot, go back here, put on the Gimp suit, walk back out. Then she gets back in her car, so we're just going to tail her a little longer. There's a red light here, so we'll just stop down and wait for a little bit. Then we follow her car down the street until we get to this red light. So, we're just going to hang back a little bit for a minute, wait for this light to turn green. It does eventually, but don't worry, there's another red light right around the corner. But then you go over a bridge where you have to wait at this red light for a sec. This is where I started to get really bored and got distracted playing with the camera, and I didn't realize I was too close, so I failed the mission. If that happens to you, don't worry. You just have to repeat the simple process I've been outlining so far. Then once you get back to the same red light, you're just going to wait until the light turns green. Then all you have to do is follow over here, which is where you find a red light. At this red light, what you're going to want to do is wait for a little while. Make sure to keep your distance, because remember, there's nothing more suspicious than a car following normal traffic patterns. Idling on the wrong side of the street is much less conspicuous. So the light turns green, you follow her around the corner to her house. Don't lose track of which house it was like last time. And then you're going to wait here for a minute for the Gimp to show up. Now you know which guy it is, so you take him out, get the dildo, go into her house, and boom! You've barely wasted 45 minutes. All I'm saying is, checkpoints. I'm not trying to skip the hard part. I'm trying to skip the slow, grueling, pointless crawl before the hard part. There are definitely more missions that suffer from similar issues, but the great missions far outweigh the lame ones. You can also see Rockstar's modern-day style of overly scripted mission design starting to creep in a bit for the first time. Like how this truck is chasing you and it says shoot the truck, but the truck actually does nothing because they need the truck for the T2 moment. Or when you're supposed to kill Pulaski, but you can't actually kill him yet, you have to wait for him to get through his evil villain monologue before you can actually do any damage. This is only a small handful of moments that aren't actually that bad themselves. It's just that you can see the seeds being planted for what would become one of the worst aspects of Rockstar's game design later on. But overall, the missions are amazing. In fact, I would say this game has the strongest mission design out of every GTA I've ever played. There were just a couple that made me insane. Now, if you watched my last video, you may remember that I loved Vice City so much that I decided to 100% it. And I didn't get very far. I was stopped at the shooting range, which you will understand if you've played Vice City on the PS2. I blamed the PS2 controller itself for this, but honestly, the analog stick controls are fine in San Andreas, so I'd like to apologize to the PS2 and its controller. You guys are fine, and I'm sorry I jumped to such an uninformed conclusion. The bad controls were entirely Vice City's fault, not the PS2's. And not my fault for being bad. I don't usually 100 games. Even if I love a game, I usually stop around 80 to 90%, but after my failure last time, I kind of felt like I had something to prove, so I decided to go for it in San Andreas. And I chose to start with the paramedic missions because I assumed it would be the hardest, and it was. I said the Las Vegas tailing gauntlet was the worst story mission in the game, but paramedic is the worst mission in the game, period. This was the least fun 5-hour chunk of gaming I've ever experienced in my life. Yes, 5 hours. I gave up on the Vice City shooting range after 3 hours, but that was because I just couldn't see any improvement after that time, and it seemed like a totally futile effort. Unfortunately, I could see myself getting a little better each time I failed the paramedic mission, so I had to complete it. In this mission, you pick people up in an ambulance and drive them to the hospital. There are 12 levels, which you have to complete in one go. If you fail on level 12, well, it's right back to level 1. On level 1, you just have to bring one guy to the hospital, and he's right around the corner. Round 2, you gotta pick up 2 people and drive them both to the hospital, right around the corner. Round 3 is 3 people, but 3 is the maximum the ambulance can hold, so round 4 and onwards, you have to start making multiple trips, and each round, the patients get further and further away from you until you have to drive all around the city to get to them. Also, you fail the mission if the ambulance explodes, and you can't get it repaired because it's an emergency vehicle. And you can't flip it over because then it explodes, and you can't get out and get a new one, and also if you accidentally click the right stick, you fail the mission. No, are you sure you want to exit the mission type warning screen or anything like that? Nope, just one wrong button click and the mission's over, no matter how far you got. All of the vehicle missions are like this, by the way. Firefighter missions, taxi missions, pimping missions, but it's worse in this one because the stakes are so much higher. I guess you could say just don't touch the analog stick, and yeah, I guess, but I sometimes do it just on instinct, even if I'm not trying to, and it makes the mission even harder not getting to look around and see where you're going. Plus, in the firefighter missions, you actually have to use the analog stick to aim your hose. Luckily, in the pimping missions, your hoes aim themselves. I was so bummed when I reached level 12 a few hours in, and I was like, okay, just one more patient to collect. I've got plenty of time left on the timer. It was a challenging run, but I'm glad it's over. Then I got to the destination, and it was like, oop, he's up here on the freeway somewhere, and I had no idea how to get up there, and it was this huge interchange, and I didn't even know what level the patient was on, and I couldn't figure out how to get to that part of the freeway, and I failed. Fuck this mission. After trying and failing for a few hours, I realized this would probably be way easier if I was in Las Venturas, so I drove out there, and I will say this was the right move. My advice is to do all the vehicle missions in Las Venturas. It has the most simple layout of all the cities, and it's pretty much completely flat, aside from the sunken highway. By the time I finished the paramedic mission, CJ had almost starved to death, because you aren't allowed to get out of the ambulance to get food, and it takes 5 ever to complete, because again, you have to do it all in one go. Hey, you know what? Here's a thought. If a mission takes so long that your character almost starves to death, maybe you've made the mission too long. Another super unfair way to fail the mission. I mean, they made the ambulance way more durable here than they did in 3, but at least in that one you couldn't starve to death. I mean, who am I kidding? The trade-off's more than worth it. I'd rather starve to death in real life than try to complete the GTA 3 paramedic missions. So I finished finally and did the other vehicle missions. Some of them were some light fun, none of them were very hard. Vigilante might be hard in a police car, but if you use a tank, it's laughably easy. See, this is a great example of what I'm talking about with the car models. Just look at how much better the tank looks than it did in GTA 3. Hey, the quarry missions, they're the second worst thing in the game. They're insanely tedious and janky. The only saving grace is that you get to complete each level individually, so you don't have to start from level 1 if you fail like you did in Paramedic. I think the final quarry mission sums up the whole thing perfectly. In this one, you have to use this janky-ass bulldozer to push 2 dead bodies into this spot, so then you can use this janky-ass crane to pick them up and put them into this janky-ass dump truck and drive this janky-ass dump truck to the edge of this cliff without the bodies falling out of the wide-open back, and then dump them into the water without letting the truck fall into the water. Hey geniuses, here's an idea. Why not just drive the dump truck to the bottom of the quarry and load up the bodies right there, instead of going bulldozer to train to dump truck to lake? Or better yet, just steal a Jeep, drive that down to the quarry and load it up with the bodies. That thing can handle the rough terrain and has a trunk so the bodies won't fall out the back. Plus, you could just drive it straight into the water and not have to worry about saving your precious dump truck. At the end, I tried to dump the bodies into the water, but one landed right on the edge of the cliff and didn't quite make it in. There's no way to put them back in the truck, and there's no way for CJ to pick them up or move them. The timer was running down, and I was fucking pissed because Luckily, I was able to move it with the shotgun, and I had just enough ammo to get it into the water. Fuck the quarry missions, fuck the paramedic missions, and fuck Lance Vance. Most of the other stuff wasn't too hard. Trucking missions were fine, the dirt bike challenge took some practice, and it was pretty fun. The BMX challenge was hard at first, but I accidentally found this glitch where I hit a ring right as the timer hit 0, and that just seemed to give me unlimited time to complete it. Stadium events were really cool, the races were decently challenging but never unfair. I couldn't use my cheap strategies from the last 2 games of creating a roadblock or blowing everyone else up, so I had to rely on actual skill. Luckily, the racers here aren't as psychotic as they once were. In GTA 3, they would immediately get into a 15-car pile-up the second the race starts, and just continue driving like maniacs. I think they deserve to get blown up. The Mount Chiliad challenges kind of pissed me off. I mean, I thought they were fun. They're just mountain bike races, but for some reason they're classed as challenges instead of races. See, in this game, unlike the other two, if you lose a race, it restarts the race and starts you at the beginning of the starting line. But since these are classed as challenges, you actually have to make your way back up to the mountain to start the race over. Even for the one that actually starts at the bottom of the mountain, you still have to drive to the top to access it. Like, yeah, it's because that's because it's a challenge, not a race. A race resets you at the beginning. This is a challenge, not a race. Oh, okay, so what's the challenge? Well, the challenge is beating the other contestants in a race. The import car collecting was really tedious, but I could see it being fun if you're just doing it casually throughout your playthrough. Like if you get into a random car while you're playing and realize it's on the list, so you drop it off at the docks. I could see that being fun, but trying to do them all in one go is super lame. The shooting range was pretty easy. Shout out Vice City. Courier missions were fine. Boating school, driving school, bike school, all kind of hard, but fine. However, at one point the gym wasn't letting me work out. Every time I tried, it said, "You've worked out enough for today." But bro, no, I haven't worked out at all, man. It's been weeks. Please, my delts, bro. My delts need attention. I was like, that sucks. I'll miss my sweet physique, but whatever. I'm almost done. Weird bug. But I hadn't learned all the fighting moves at all the gyms yet, which you need to do to get 100% completion, and you can't do that if you aren't jacked. But I couldn't work out, so there was no way to get jacked. I kept sleeping and going back to the gym day after day, hoping it would trigger something that would let me bench. I couldn't believe it. After getting caught up on the shooting range in Vice City and deciding I wouldn't let a skill issue beat me this time, and doing those awful tedious side missions, paramedic missions, quarry missions, I got stopped because of a stupid bug. But this wasn't a skill issue or a hardware issue or a game design issue. I was defeated by a bug after all that work, and I wasn't able to get to 100%. But then I looked up the issue online, found the fix eventually, went to the gym, got jacked again, learned fighting, took all the pictures, tagged all the walls, got all the horseshoes, got all the oysters, and achieved 100% completion. Hell yeah! Let me know in the comments if you also got 100% in San Andreas on the PlayStation 2. Yeah, this really reminded me of why I don't usually 100% games. Once you run out of fun stuff, the last bits of the journey are always going to be frustrating and or tedious. Gathering hundreds of random collectibles is always so lame to me. The 2 paths to go down are either 1, you use a guide and there's not much thought or challenge, or 2, you don't use a guide and it takes up months combing every square inch of the map. Neither of these seem fun to me at all, it's just that 1 is way faster. My stance has always been, just play a game for as long as it's fun. Once there's no more fun stuff to do, either redo the stuff you liked or stop playing it. The exception to this is, of course, if there's a cool reward at the end of the 100%, then, go ahead and do the tedious shit if you think it's worthwhile for the reward. I did it in this game because I felt like I had something to prove, and now that I proved it, I don't even know what it was. San Andreas is one of the best games I've ever played, but I walked away from the first playthrough with a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, because I chose to spend the last couple of hours of the experience doing the worst part of the game. Just play the fun parts. It's kinda neat that the tank and the Hydra spawn at your house now, but they're pretty easy to find in the game, and also you can just spawn them whenever you want with cheat codes, so I certainly wouldn't call it a worthwhile reward. I hate to end this video on a negative note because the game truly lives up to every bit of hype that surrounded it for the last 20 years, but unfortunately my playthrough ended on a negative note trying to complete all those side quests. But hey, the conversation doesn't end here. Let's talk about something positive. I also played the Definitive Edition. Wait a minute, that's not positive. That's not positive at all. Hey, wait a second, what's going on here? Who are you guys? I don't want to talk about this. I just want to go home, please. Please, I just want to see my kids. Why are you doing Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, the definitive edition, is the final curb stomp to the proverbial teeth of my Grand Theft Auto face. This collection is like the inverse of their PS2 counterparts, where each entry in the original trilogy showed an increase in the developer's artistic prowess, passion, and technical skill. Each entry in the definitive trilogy further highlights the developer's low standards and complete lack of understanding and respect for these games. I guess the most obvious place to start is once again the lack of the original atmosphere. The orange haze was so iconic in the original. Of course, it was implemented because of the hardware limitations. Even at the time, the much more powerful Xbox didn't use the same orange haze to hide the draw distance, but it really is such a big part of the game's identity, and although it was a result of limitations, well, son, limitations are what breed creativity. The desert had so much character in the original, and here, yeah, it's just so plain. It looks like some cheap generic Unity game. Oh man, now we don't have to hide the draw distance because we have the capability to show the entire map on screen all at one time. That was a nice little bonus in the last two, getting a clear view of the skyline, but in this one, I'd go so far as to say it completely destroys the magic of the map. What once felt like a massive, sprawling, endless expanse of land now feels like a tiny, lame battle royale map from some shitty Chinese Fortnite knockoff. No matter where you are on the map, you're pretty much always going to be able to see the tops of the buildings from at least two cities. I thought it would be kind of nice to be able to get a sense of the skylines of the cities when you're actually in them, but really getting a full view of each city kind of emphasizes how small they actually are, and that combined with always being able to see the surrounding wilderness, it kind of just makes them feel like small mountain towns. Like here I am in the original, driving around deep in South Central, but then you pop on the definitive edition and it's like, oh no, I'm just in this tiny little city surrounded by forest. It also makes the nature areas feel smaller too. Here I am in the original, way out in the woods in my little shack. It's deep in the country, off a back road, off a dirt road, off a side road, far away from civilization, and oh, never mind, actually the city's right there. You can see it from the front porch. Same goes for Mount Chiliad. Used to feel like it was some giant mountain out in a national park. Now you can see all three cities completely clearly. Oh, what's this? Oh, okay, never mind, don't worry. See, they realized that giving you a full view of the map made it suck, so they actually added this fog option to obscure it. Hopefully this can help not break the illusion, so let's give it a try. And here we go! Wow, it's just incredible. Thank you, Rockstar. Thank you for restoring Grand Theft Auto San Andreas to its former glory. Just beautiful, gorgeous looking map. So my last hope was Las Venturas. I thought, alright, if I face this direction and just drive up the strip, I won't be able to see any other cities, I won't be able to see the forest, and I get to appreciate how cool the strip looks at night. But this was a letdown too. This hotel here, based on the real-life Treasure Island Hotel, it's very cool in the original, and the colored lighting out front is really nice, and since the neon lights of Vice City were like the only nice looking part of the definitive trilogy so far, I was like, ooh, I bet Treasure Island is gonna look super nice with the nice lighting. Nope, they just got rid of all the lights. It's just dark out front. On top of that, the hotels all just look like shit when you're driving around because every building that's more than 20 feet from you just looks like melted ice cream. Unless you're pretty much close enough to touch it, all the buildings stay in low poly mode, so we're really getting the worst of both worlds from the draw distance. We can see across the entire map, which kills the illusion of scale, but everything we see looks like shit because these people don't know how to do a video game. Nobody ever wanted to be able to see the entire map. That sucks. The controls are bad. None of the aiming options feel right. In fact, I'd say the shooting here is actually a massive step down from the PS2 original. Using the triggers to snap between targets feels super sluggish when before it was just instant. Also, if you use this method, it means that you don't get to use the analog controls as well, even though you could use them both on the PS2, but if you do switch to analog stick aiming, then you can't snap between targets anymore. I cannot believe they actually made it worse. If you wanted to use more modern controls, why not just make them identical to the shooting controls in GTA 5? Weapon wheel is nice. I mean, I feel like in this game, more than the last two, it's beneficial to make sure you're using the right weapon for each scenario, so the wheel feels more useful than ever. I love the definitive edition. Okay, now let's do a little lightning round of nitpicks. Ready, go! They filled CJ's garage with some shelves and trash cans and a bunch of junk. Looks a little nicer, but now you can't really fit 2 cars in it anymore. Bad decision. Messed up collision. Sweet looks stupid. Weightlifting mechanic dumbed down. Learning new fighting styles dumbed down. Punching bags in the gym no longer move when you hit them. Look at this AK-47. Why is it like that? This version doesn't tell you when you're about to go hungry. I guess they expect you to just keep remembering to always check your stats to make sure you're not hungry. The jet nozzles on the jetpack don't move anymore? That's really lame. I'm sure that would have just been impossible to program. You actually have way less camera control when flying than you did on the PS2. Ken, you look worse every single time I see you. Couldn't figure out a way to show the rest of the Liberty City skyline even in the definitive edition? Alright, I don't know. There's a couple of improvements. Let's talk about them real quick. I already mentioned the weapon wheel, which is nice. Still the radio wheel, even though there are less songs. Guided waypoints are nice, even though they don't work 100% of the time. Why are you taking me this way? That's not a road. Overall, the game looks worse, but interiors generally look a little nicer. And they have checkpoints, actual checkpoints this time. The other two had checkpoints, but they weren't real checkpoints, to just let you start the mission over right away. San Andreas Definitive Edition has actual checkpoints throughout most of the missions. I guess I like that, but it also has me retroactively more mad at this collection for not adding these to the other two. I don't need them in every mission, but there are a few that really could have used at least one checkpoint. Okay, also let's talk about the Netflix iPhone version, I guess. People think this version's amazing, and they're wrong. The only thing that's nice about it is the classic lighting, and that's nice, but certainly doesn't fix the game, and it seems like for some reason it'll never be added to the console or PC version. It's even more egregious that this feature exists, but they choose not to give you access to it. It has all the same problems as the console version, plus new problems that come with playing the game on your phone. Also, I'm starting to ask myself, who the hell wants to play this type of game on their phone? I feel like mobile games are best when they're small, bite-sized experiences, which is why I wanted to talk to you about today's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Just kidding. My point is that these games are meant for you to really spend some time sinking your teeth into and immersing yourself in, not really to just mess around with on the bus for 10 minutes. It just feels like it'd be such a neutered experience playing it on a tiny smartphone screen between classes instead of sitting down at home in front of your TV all night.
Now, if you're playing
Grand Theft Auto
on a telephone, you will never in a trillion years experience the
video game.
You'll think you have experienced it, but you'll be cheated. It's such a sadness that you think you've
played Grand Theft Auto San Andreas
on your fucking telephone. Get real.
I also happen to have this random PS4 version of San Andreas that was released a few years ago. It's not available to buy anymore because they only want you playing the bad one, but I got it a long time ago. When I first played it, I thought, wow, this looks too old. Then I got to the bike chase sequence and kept falling and said, welp, I'm never gonna play that game. That was about 8 years ago. And now I have played it. This is a super bare bones port of the PS2 version, which is a bit lame, but still obviously better than what we have now. Everything's still intact, the lighting is slightly less dark during cutscenes and stuff. This is just straight up the PS2 version on PS4, with songs missing, of course. I mean, I can't recommend this to anyone because it's not available to buy anymore, but next time I play San Andreas, it's almost definitely going to be this version, unless I get a PC before then, but that is unlikely. And so here we are, the end of the video. I've now experienced one of the most legendary games of all time. A perfect end to this trilogy in every way imaginable. I started with GTA 3, which got me thinking maybe these games aren't going to be that fun, but I ended up being dead wrong. San Andreas is one of the best games I've ever played. I doubt that's shocking to anybody watching, but you know what is shocking? I kinda still like Vice City more. I don't know, man, the story just spoke to me a little more. It's a lot more similar to my favorite crime movies than any other GTA really is. Tommy Vercetti is also like my favorite protagonist at this point. I like CJ, but I found his personality and motivations a little harder to nail down. I really loved Tommy's confidence and harder edge. More than anything though, the tone and setting of Vice City are what set it above for me. This might sound contradictory, but I feel like Vice City had a more fun vibe than San Andreas while also having a more serious tone. Vice City felt like a 24/7 neon and cocaine-fueled party where you're chilling on yachts and golf courses and cruising down the beach with the wind in your hair. A lot of San Andreas has kind of a gritty, grimy vibe to it. Everything feels yellowed and dirty and old. Look how the water in San Andreas is sad and dark. Look how the water in Vice City is blue and sparkly. Vice City almost feels like a magical fantasy world, and the soundtrack is absolute god tier. Whereas the San Andreas soundtrack is just like, it's a decent playlist. The story and characters and situations are much wackier and over the top than the relatively grounded story of Vice City. I also thought the mall in Vice City was cooler than any of the indoor locations in San Andreas, even though a lot of them were really cool. I know that if your favorite GTA isn't San Andreas or 4, then you're a fucking idiot, but here's the real, indisputable reason why Vice City is better than San Andreas. It has this really cool escalator that you can just hop onto and it works right away. They broke it in the definitive edition, but I just love how they were able to get this working so well on the PS2. The escalators don't work in San Andreas! Wow. I can't believe you made it to the end of this video. If you've been keeping up, you might remember that my original plan was to move on to GTA 4 at this point. But I got a lot of comments on my previous videos saying I should cover Liberty City stories and Vice City stories first, so I thought, you know what, fuck it. I'm enjoying the 3D era quite a bit, no need to hop off this train prematurely, so come back for my next video on Liberty City stories. I understand those are smaller games, so hopefully it won't take me so long to make those videos. And if you liked this video for some reason, subscribe for more. Hope to see you soon, and as they say in Grand Theft Auto, this is the last dance for Lance Vance.